Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for being on live or watching this video, whichever way you are accessing this information. Today is session 6. Well done for getting this far, halfway through your Easter holidays. I know all you want to be doing is eating chocolate, but well done for being on here and getting those exam techniques all sorted and getting a bit of revision in, which is great. So session 6, I'm just going to share my screen with you. Here we go. Right, so here we are. We've got I've just made it disappear. Session 6, language, model answer and mark scheme. Okay, so that's what we're going to be going through today. And then the rest of the week, tomorrow we've got our quotes, so we're going to be looking at a few different things with those. Then we're going to do doing our poetry. I'm going to be giving you a system for looking at your unseen poetry, and we're going to be looking at some of the anthology poems if we have some time, although I know they've probably been covered by your examiner, by your teacher. Then on I think that ends up being Thursday. Yes, it's Thursday. Thursday we're doing our revision techniques, so that's things like how to schedule revision, how to decide what to do, all that kind of stuff. And then finally we've got oh no, that will be on Friday, because Friday we've got our double session, haven't we? And then Friday will be revision techniques, and then we've got our hour of power and Q&A. So on Friday, that that last hour is how to get your mindset ready, how to cope with stress, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be much more about well-being, and then a Q&A on anything you want to ask me to do with anything in the course that we've done over the 2 weeks, or anything that is a burning question that you have that hasn't been answered by any teachers that you have, or anything that maybe has contradicted what you've been taught and you're not sure of. Don't be afraid to ask, okay, because obviously I'm going to have different ways of teaching than the teachers you have sometimes, but hopefully we're teaching you things that are all helpful for your exam. So let's look at our language model answers. Now, it is a bit tricky trying to get some past papers on your language papers, because when you go onto the AQA website, which I know some of you have done, if you go onto the AQA website, the papers that they've blacked out some of the inserts. This is because it's about copyright. So where books have been published, the author maybe hasn't given permission, or if they have, they've said, it's just for the exam, it's not for anything else, because obviously that's their material, they should be paid for, which is really inconvenient because it means you can't see the extract that they're talking about. But I'll do my best to go through the bits that do help and give you some advice on those sections, even if we don't have a specific answer there. We're still going to go through the mark scheme as well, so it will still give you an idea as to what we're looking at. So just bringing up my next window. Right, share screen. Here we go. As you can see, I'm a bit more prepared today. Actually, I've had half an hour without Charlie being at home and wanting all my attention, so I actually got to get things up and running. So right, so I'm just going to go through these different ones. I don't want to do paper 2 yet, I want to do paper 1. So we've got the paper 1 question paper, and then we're doing the paper 1 and the paper 2 are both from the 2022. They're listed as November, but this exam was actually on the 31st of October, but normally the retakes are done in the November, so just so you know, that's why that says October. And we're going to be looking at the mark scheme. We're going to be looking at the paper and, of course, the insert. So, paper 1, explorations in creative reading and writing. So remember, with your English language, you have 2 papers. So before, I did this kind of thing with my hands, if you've seen one of my other videos or you've been on the course. So you've got English literature and English language. We're just going to look at English language today. We did literature last lesson. So in your English language, you've got 2 papers. In each paper, you've got 2 sections. One is always reading, one is always writing. In paper 1, explorations in creative reading and writing, this is about creative reading and writing, the creative side, obviously it's in the title. But it's important to bring that up, because even when I did my exams, I wasn't sure what came up in which paper. If you know what to look at the night before, and more importantly what not to look at the night before, so you're not cramming for things that you don't actually need to do until maybe the next paper. So in this paper, you're going to be looking at 2 sources, and you're going to be answering questions in the first half of the paper. Okay, now it should be about an hour 45. So again, think of doing a mark a minute, allowing a mark a minute for every question that you answer. And you want to be looking to be spending 45 minutes on the planning and the writing or the answering for each section. So 45 minutes for section A, 45 minutes for section B. And then that should give you 15 minutes to check your answers, add in some more advanced vocabulary if you can, or ambitious vocabulary if you're looking for those grade 9s. Putting in some extra punctuation. So remember, one of the things that you're assessed on is your ability to use the wording is, and you'll see in the mark scheme in a minute, is to do with a variety of punctuation. So if you've got in, your standard is commas, full stops and speech marks. If you can get in there an exclamation mark, a question mark, a colon and a semicolon, that's great, you're off and running. And also some hyphens if you want to use hyphens instead of brackets, or use brackets, showing off as many different like punctuation marks as you can, but only if you can effectively use them. So you only have to use them once to show that you can do that, but if you do all of them, or as many as you can once, then that's great. So like I said, standard, just to remind you, is full stops, commas and speech marks. And then extra is a question mark, exclamation mark, but especially a colon and semicolon. If you can get them in, then you are off and running. So you will receive in your exam 2 pieces of paper, one pamphlet, or sort of like, it's like a little folded piece of paper thing. One will be your exam paper, one will be your insert. You normally write directly on your exam paper. Sometimes they will give you either extra paper or they'll give you an answer booklet as well. But usually nowadays, that was when I was at school, but usually nowadays they do give you the answer booklet, and you put where the questions are, you put your answers in where the questions are. So you just have the 2. So the question paper, question answer paper, and the insert. The insert is everything you need to read. Make sure you read everything. Obviously, that's what that extra 15 minutes is for as well. If you're doing 45 minutes for each section, that 15 minutes is part of your reading time too. It's also important to note that you will usually have one excerpt that is from a sort of Victorian era, so from the 1900s, early 1900s or late 1800s, and one that is relatively modern. So something like here you go, it didn't highlight all of that, 1952. Okay, so I know that doesn't feel very modern to you guys. I'm really old, so that feels like, you know, not that long ago. Not that I was around in 1952, I'm not quite that old, but not that that's old. Anyone who's watching who's born in 52, don't think they are. Anyway, waffling. So it's really important to note that if you've got one that is clearly from 20th century and one that is 21st century, that you acknowledge that, because what they're looking for here is they're looking at how the writer has come to the point of writing what they've written. So one of the booklets, for example, was about insomnia. And it might even be one that comes up later, actually. One of them was on insomnia, and one was where they'd written about how they couldn't sleep, and it was clearly written a long time ago, and it was clearly at least 19th century, 20th century, if not earlier. Sorry, 19th century. It's the 1800s or earlier. And it was saying that they'd woken up and they couldn't get to sleep, so they tried eating and that didn't work, and they tried counting sheep, and they tried these really old-fashioned ways of trying to beat their insomnia and get to sleep. And then the second source was about how somebody had tried different medications and things like this, and it was very clearly written much more recently and was clearly 21st century. And so if you can acknowledge the fact that they're different, what that also means is, of course, there's a difference in science and medications and knowledge and education in those two things. So that's going to be the case for anything that you look at, whether it doesn't matter what topic it's on. If you've got one that's from a Victorian period and one that's from a modern period, then people are educated much more in the more recent one. People have much more access to information. So, for example, in the sleeping one, the important part was the eating thing showed that you know, in the 20th century, the 1900s one, that was saying how they ate to try and make them go to sleep. Well, we know now that actually eating in the middle of the night, you know, is going to up your sugar level, which is going to keep you awake. So that might not necessarily help. And it's that information that we have, that access to information that we have, that influences what the writer has written. So if you can put that in, that's your way of giving context to something that you maybe think you don't know anything about. You know, so you're giving that context of how the writer has done that. And that's even in the creative writing, not just in the one that's in the one about writers' viewpoints. So it says here, source A is 20th century prose fiction. So prose means not poetry. The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. And it's an extract from the beginning of a novel published in 1952. So it will tell you, particularly in AQA, this is all today is AQA, it will tell you when it was published. So acknowledge it. Say if one's earlier, you know, obviously you'll be able to make some assumptions on the influences of the writer in the different writers in those times. This text cannot be reproduced here due to third-party copyright restrictions. The extract starts on page 1 of the novel. Okay, actually, I'm going to see if I can do a very quick search online. I can't imagine I will be able to get it because obviously it's under copyright. But sometimes you never know. Here we go, full text. Okay, so there's a little bit of it here. I'm not sure of that one, so I'm not gonna risk it. We won't risk it for a biscuit on that one. Okay, so we know that that's the Old Man in the Sea. Okay, so that's the only extract you've got there is the source A. Okay, that's our insert. So you'll get your insert. It won't be blacked out like that. Obviously, you will be able to see it in your exam. Okay, when it gets to the question paper, this is what it will look like. Your center number is it'll be up on the board at the front of the room, or it'll be on your table if you have a little card. We had little cards, there's different ways, but you will be able to see it somewhere. Your center number is where you are. So everybody in your room, their center number will be the same. Your candidate number is individual. So yours will be different to everybody else's. So make sure that one definitely is right. And then, of course, you write in your surname, forenames, including your middle names if you have any, and you sign it, and you're signing it to say that this is your own work. So for this paper, you must have source A. So you know for a fact you've got your source material, which we just looked at, and that you've only got one source for this one, source A. That may be different. You may be given two sources, but usually it's the same format. You won't be given more than that anyway. Answer all the questions, and make sure you read this, because sometimes it might give you an option and say you can answer question 1 or question 2, or answer one question in this section or something like that, just to be sure, just so you know. And it also gives you time to lower your cortisol levels, lower your adrenaline, and give you a chance for your brain to sort of go, okay, we're sat here now, we're good, let's just crack on. Okay, Fill in the boxes at the top of this page. You will have done that by the time you to read this. You must answer the questions in the spaces provided. If you need extra space for your answers, use the lined pages at the end of this book. Write the question number against your answers. That's really important. The last thing you want is for you to have written this amazing extension of one of your pieces, and then you've not written the question number, so they don't know which bit it goes to, and then you don't get the marks for it. Do all rough work in this book. Cross through any work you do not want to be marked. So if you're going to do plans, which I'd highly recommend wherever possible, then make sure they can see them. Because if you don't finish your work, if you don't finish your essay, but you've got it in your plan, you could get extra marks for it if they can see where you're going, where your line of thought was going. You must refer to the insert booklet provided. Okay, so it's asking you to give examples from that, directly from that. And you must not use a dictionary where you're not going to be able to get hold of one because you're going to be sat there in your exam. Information. The marks for questions are shown in brackets. The maximum mark for this paper is 80. You're reminded of the need for good English and clear presentation in your answers. One of the things I have been sort of pulling up some of my students on is how legible their writing is. It's not a handwriting test, but if they can't read your writing easily, then you might not get a mark for something. That could be the difference in you getting an 8 or a 9 or getting a 4 or 5, because it could make it, if they read it as something incorrectly, it could change the meaning and then not make sense, or showing it might look like a spelling mistake or whatever, and it can be the difference between one whole band. So you want to make sure you're getting those answers up, not losing marks just because you're rushing or doing teeny tiny writing or very close together writing. Make it really clear. The other thing you need to remember, and I always say this to my students, is each examiner does not only mark one paper. So imagine you're an examiner and you've got to mark 400 GCSE English language papers. Okay, you don't know where your paper goes. If you're number one, they've just started that day, they're ready to go, they've had their coffee, off they go with their marking. They're going to be a little bit more looking for things and things like that. They're only human. If you're number 400 on the last day and they've just had 4 papers of people with teeny tiny writing, are they going to be as tolerant to that? Are they going to be able to, they're starting to get a bit tired, they're probably hungry, that, again, remember these examiners, that of course they're going to mark you fairly, they're going to do their best and they do an amazing job, but they are still human. So make it easy for them to give you the marks you deserve. So clear handwriting is a huge way of making sure you get the marks that you should get. And checking your work. Oh my gosh. I have found this year particularly that the students I've done mock exams with up to this point have gone up, some of them by 3 grades, by checking their work. And they've gone, oh, I didn't write that bit in. Oh, I didn't put the quote in. I thought I'd done it. Or, oh, I didn't put the context in. Or I did it, but that's not what I meant. Or, oh my goodness, I haven't put any of my punctuation in that I meant to, because I normally go back and put it in, but I didn't. Things like that, you want to be making sure that you give yourself that time to do. Okay, you almost need to allow yourself being a little bit daft in your exam, a bit more daft than we are. Oh, here we go. That's could be George? Yes, it's George. Okay, hi George, lovely to see you. I'm just going to crack on, but I'll give you the recording, so don't worry. We're just talking about our English language papers today and some model answers and things like that. So where were we? We were talking about timings, weren't we? Yes, checking, that's what I'm saying. So making sure you really do check your answers and do it really thoroughly. It's not just skim through, oh yeah, I've done it. Use every second, every minute that you've got. then it says there are 40 marks for section A and 40 marks for section B. So again, your 45 minutes for each section. Think about it as a mark a minute roughly. And then your 15 minutes spare to do your checking, put in more punctuation, upgrade your vocabulary, anything you can do to get a few more marks in there. You'll be assessed on the quality of your reading in section A and your writing in section B. Advice. You're advised to spend about 15 minutes reading through all the source and all 5 questions you have to answer. You're advised to plan your answer to question 5 before you start to write. You should make sure you leave sufficient time to check your answers, okay? So if it's saying allow 15 minutes reading, then you want to be allowing a bit of your essay time that we've just said to check your work. But in all honesty, I don't think it will be taking you 15 minutes to read unless you have a particular difficulty with your reading, but you'll be given extra time. So don't rush. But my advice would be just read through it twice. As soon as you've finished your reading your source twice, think of starting the timer. And then what I suggest you do is, let's say you start reading and you finish it, say you start your exam at 9 a.m. I think most of the English ones are at 9 a.m. So say you sit down and you start at 9 o'clock on the dot. Let's say you take 10 minutes to read your source paper. That gives you till 9:10. You've got 45 minutes for section A, okay? So I would say next to the question on your answer, on your actual question sheet, so here I would write the start time, 9:10 a.m. Okay, so here you write 9:10. Okay, you can always cross it out after. Okay, then you're going to count down your 45 minutes. So if it's 9:10, that takes you to 9:55. So at section B, where are we? When it gets to section B, which is question 5, I would put next to that 9:55. Okay, because then you know when you get there that you've allowed enough time. Okay, now if you're thinking of a mark a minute and you're looking at section A, we're going to split up section A a little bit more. All right. So sorry, I'm probably making you feel very, very sick. Look at this going up and down and up and down. I'm sorry about the pinging answers going off. Right, so section A is 4 marks. Allow yourself about 5 minutes, okay? 4 or 5 minutes. So if you're starting at 9:10, here you're going to write 9:15, okay? Then you know that when you get to question 2, you're going to have a little check. That little mark is going to remind you, oh, let me just check the time, 9:15. Am I on track? If you're running over in your earlier question and it's now maybe 9:20, you don't need to panic, because allowing a mark a minute actually allows you a bit more, it gets you going a little bit quicker than you need to. So it allows for a little bit of leeway. But if you look at it as a mark a minute, now we've got 8 marks. So if this is 9:15, we're going to allow, if it's 8 marks, allow 10 minutes, yeah? So 9:15, we know we've got 9:25. When we get to question 3, we're going to put 9:25 in the column here. Then again, it's going to help us keep on track. If we get here and it's 9:30, we know we need to speed up a teeny bit in how we're answering our questions, only a teeny bit. Don't sacrifice the bigger marked questions, okay? And I would suggest that you put all these little times in the column at the very, very beginning. Work it out at the very beginning after you've read your source material, then put in your time. So allow yourself like a little bit of time to do that. Here, 20 marks. Allow yourself 20 minutes for that one, okay? So that's going to be, what's that, 9:15, 9:35, okay? And then that will take us to here, which is, yeah, 9:55. So that should be about right. So then you've got from 9:55 until 10, I'll do my time now, 9:55 till 10, I think that is. So 10:40, you're going to allow yourself section B. But what I want you to do with section B is allow yourself half of that 45 minutes to plan. Okay. Now, in all honesty, for your creative writing paper, which is what we're looking at now, you probably won't need much time to plan because you're not having to put in a story necessarily, or it depends which one you choose. You're not having to put in loads and loads of support and context and things like that. It's just you writing. Okay. But do allow time to plan. And I'm going to go through that in a second. Okay. So question B with your writing, you should now have left at least 45 to 50 minutes for your exam. Okay. And you're going to be choosing one of these questions. Okay. It says write in full sentences, spend about 45 minutes on this section. Write in full sentences, you're reminded of the need to plan your answer. You should leave enough time to check your work at the end. Okay. So if you're thinking we've got 45 minutes, let's think 20 minutes plan, 20 minutes write up, 5 minutes check. And then you should have a bit of time left over at the end as well to check your whole paper that you've answered every question. See if you've got, even if you've got 2 minutes left, find one word on the page you're on. Can you upgrade that word? Can you find the word fast? If you've got the word fast, can you do speedy? Can you change it to it's like the worst word to think of that I can't think off the top of my head. But do you see what I mean? If there's a word that says big, can you say huge? Can you say, enormous? Anything you can do to get in some extra vocab, that's going to up your grade as well. So anyway, back to the question of section B. You're going to be given 2 questions and you only have to answer one. And they're worth 40 marks, okay? And that is split 24 marks for content and organisation, 16 marks for technical accuracy. So the reason they're asking you to plan is because it's kind of similar to what I've done with you on your past lessons, which we're going to go through again specifically for the language paper because it's slightly different today. And that is that if you do a plan, you get all your content in there, all the stuff you want to put in, all your language techniques that you're going to identify or use, put all that in your plan. You don't have to think about it. That part of your brain can go, well, that's done. Now all I need to do is look at those little boxes, write it up in full sentences, add in my language techniques to show off what I know, and look at this time we're looking at the technical accuracy. So that's being split. Your marks, your 40 marks are split roughly into 5 sections. So your content, what you actually write, and organization, so how you do it, is worth 3/5 of your marks, and 2/5 of your marks are on technical accuracy, which is spelling, grammar, use of paragraphs. They love paragraphs. Use of paragraphs, ambitious vocabulary, varied punctuation. That's what the technical accuracy is. Use of language techniques like alliteration, metaphors, similes appropriately and successfully. Okay, so it's all very well saying, oh, the rainbow is like a lion in the sky. Yes, that's a simile, but it's not really, if you are going to say it's like a lion in the sky, you kind of need to explain it a bit because it's quite an obscure thing to link it to. Whereas if you said the rainbow was an upside down bowl in the sky scooping the joy of the boats in a pool of soup. I don't know. It's still a weird analogy, I'm not gonna lie, but it makes sense because you've got the arc of the rainbow, you're thinking of a bowl, it's that they can go with that. I'm sure you're going to come up with far better metaphors and similes than I am doing here, but my point is they do need to be relevant, or at least be adding to your writing rather than chucking them in for the sake of it and hoping that some random metaphor is going to get you a mark. It won't. Use it effectively. So the 2 questions you get to choose from, one is usually a picture, and one is a story about a theme that's been brought up in section A with the writing from somewhere else. So the first question is usually write a description of a fishing village as suggested by this picture. Now, going back to what we've done before, we're going to circle the key words. So if we're going to do each one. So if we were doing write a description of the fishing village as suggested by this picture, we're going to highlight description, because that's very different to a story or anything like that. It's a description. I'm going to keep saying it. You're going to be sick of that word. It'll have no meaning by the time I've finished. Fishing village. It's not just about boats. It's about the fishing village. As suggested by this picture. It is so easy to be sat in that exam halfway through, if you've run over a bit, panicking, oh my God, I've got 10 minutes to write my section B. I'm never going to get through it. What have I got to do? Oh, right, fishing village. Okay, about the picture. Okay. And then all you do is write about the picture. That's not what it's asking. It's saying write a description of a fishing village as suggested by this picture, which means you can use exactly this picture, absolutely, if you want to. But think of, you know, my analogy always of being on Google Earth and zooming out. Think of zooming out a bit. What else is there around that you can add in? And that's just going to give you more to write about. You know, is there a big, I don't know, what do they call them? Sea liner is what they call them. That's just approaching. That's on this side of the picture. That's just coming in that we can't see. That'll be that side for you, isn't it? That way. You know, the rainbow, where does the rainbow end? You know, it can be, this picture is suggesting a fishing village, so it's asking you to describe things. So think about, what could you describe? What things are you good at describing? So if you're better with things like animals and the sea and water and that kind of stuff, write about that. You know, write about the fact that, you know, in the water you can see the different fish, and you know, one of the things that a lot of fishermen like is the exploration of different fish species and what they can find, and how you could dip your hook in the sea, I guess you would say it is. Yeah, it is. Dip your hook in the sea to capture instead of catch, you know, sort of upgrade that vocab. Capture the latest catch of the day, which could be anything from, I'm not great, I don't know much about fish, but anything from the plump gasping tuna to the tiny flapping minnow. Yeah, so you've got those descriptions in there. So you're saying how the fishermen are doing it, you're describing what they're doing, you're not making a story out of it. But because that's not what you want to do, that's not what they're asking you to do, but you are still describing it kind of as if it is a story, but without saying, oh, the man does this and John went into the sea and did this. You're just saying the fisherman can dip their hook in the sea to and you can get in loads of your metaphors and similes and things in there. Things like, you know, saying the boats are bobbing on with the bow rising and falling among the waves. You know, that is you know, you could argue that that's like the sound of bubbles, you know. So using that alliteration, you can still do all of that and definitely do, that's what they want you to do. Or the second one is write a story about an unlikely friendship. So this is where you get to write a story. If it's a story, you're going to need a beginning, a middle, and an end. That age-old thing we were taught from when we were really young: beginning, middle, and an end. And of the two, I would say the story is the one that is going to need a little bit more organization, because it needs to make sense and be a bit more thrilling and be more emotive, in the sense you're trying to pull in those emotions and things like that. Whereas the first one is descriptive, it's less emotional, but that's going to be more about what you see. So I'm just going to bring up the stop share Hayley, there we go. I'm just going to bring up my plan and show you how I would plan this, because it is a bit more tricky, I think, with the language one. thought I'd already opened one. Hang on. Oh, yeah, I did. Look at that. I'm so organized. I don't realize how organized I am. I mean, it's a shock. What can I say? Okay. So let's say we're going with the fishing village one. Okay, so this is an example that I took from a different paper, and it says describe a place at sunset as suggested by this picture. So you've got describe, same as before, as suggested by this picture, same as before. The only difference is a place at sunset, or the old one was, just to get the terminology right, a description of a fishing village. It's still quite vague because all they want you to do is write. They want to see your writing. You've been on this course for 2 years learning your GCSEs and learning all the stuff that's part of that course. And now they're trying to say, okay, this is your opportunity to show us not only that in section A, you can identify all the things that you know about, like alliteration, metaphor, similes, sentence structure, form, all those kinds of things. Now we want to see if you can not only see them and notice them, but you can create them and put it in your own writing. So now this is your opportunity to sort of be the writer. So if we were looking at this, I would say if you're doing the story, so first of all, I want you to ignore the picture. So I'm doing it in sort of like opposite ways around, to be honest, which it shouldn't make any difference. You're still getting the same information. But I just want to block that out first. So if you're doing your story about an unlikely friendship, then think of the opening as the opening to a novel. And I want you to think, I'm sure I've mentioned this to you, but I often mention this to my students. I want you to think of the Batman Lego movie where it says, and I need to find out what this actual quote is. So one of you can maybe find out and tell me, you might already know. But it opens with a black screen and it goes, black. Every great movie starts with a black screen. And it's that sentence structure, black. Every good movie starts with a black screen. Completely obvious sentence structure, hits us straight away with a one-word sentence. So the examiner goes, brilliant, I can tick off sentence structure. I can tick off part of your technical accuracy. In the first word is in your first sentence. That's what we want to be doing, okay? Exposure, so thinking about your first paragraph being, think of it as the exposure of characters. This is the story one we're looking at, remember. Just going to make that really bold and underlined. Story. The exposure of characters and setting. Okay, and what you want to be starting there with the senses. This is going to be funny because every time I try and think of the 5 senses, I always forget one. Touch. Let me just move that along a bit. Touch, sight, sound, taste, hear. Have I done all of those like touch, sight, sound, taste? Yeah, I did it. Oh, hey. Obviously on a roll today. If you don't know what to do, I think I said this in one of my other sessions with you, but I can't remember because I'm teaching so many people. I don't know what I'm saying to each one. So I'll always say it again, even if you hear it time and time again. Repetition is good. So start with your senses. Start with something like, if you really struggle with knowing what on earth to write and you just need to get a word or two down and then you're off and running, try with the words I step or something similar that can lead to anything. So if you get write a story about a holiday destination, you could do I step off the plane, then we're going to the senses. The heat hits me like, I think I said a wrecking ball last time I said that. Not the greatest analogy, but you know, it does the job. It hits me like a wrecking ball. The sound of the engines dying down bring up the excitement that I know I've arrived at the place I've been longing to be. I can see in the distance the beach and the waves lapping against the sand, and I can't wait to get my flip-flops and my towel out of my heavy bag, lovely adjective in there, and trot down to that beautiful sunset. Okay. Hearing the waves makes me feel like I'm there already, as I realise the queue behind me is stuck because I've stopped staring at the distance and need to carry on to actually get there. I can taste the salt in the air and I can feel the wind whipping my hair as I walk into the terminal of the airport, and the air conditioning hits me like a cold sheet of ice. So before you've even done anything about your destination or about where you are or anything like that, you've got those five senses in from the moment you've got off. All you're talking about is getting off the plane, going downstairs and going into the airport. So that tiny bit can be full of loads of senses, and that's going to get your language techniques off and running straight away and give you something to write about. Okay. If it's going to be that you are in the fishing village, the fishing village is not the story, so forget that. Scrap that moment. If it's the story about the unlikely friendship, you know, I step or he steps. So I step, and then just think to yourself, well, where am I stepping? Okay, it's an unlikely friendship. Who's clearly I'm in the story because I've just written I step, so I'm going to stick with that. I step into the room. Okay, what room is it? It's okay, my son's just gone to a Pokemon club thing today. So I step into the room full of Pokemon players, and they're all at least 10 years younger than me. And then I suddenly think, so maybe the unlikely friendship is that I'm a teenager and I've become friends with maybe like a 5-year-old, and we start to meet up every week. Right, I've got my story. So as soon as you think of that first couple of words of I step or I see, or you could even use the sentence I hear or I touch, you're instantly landing the examiner straight in the world of your story and using their senses to kind of pull that out of them. And then the other thing you want to be getting in there is emotive language, which again it's another writing technique, and using the emotions, not just how are you feeling, but how do you want to make the reader feel. Okay, so if you want them to be experiencing it with you and loving whatever it is that they're doing, then give them all that information. If you want them to feel really uncomfortable, how can you do that? What language techniques can you use to do that? Think of books you've read that have made you feel uncomfortable or make you feel eerie or dark or whatever it is that you like writing about, and write stuff write stuff you've experienced, write about stuff that you can use your memory of, so you're not having to create from scratch. Okay, you're going to need a problem. So what's going to be the challenge, the problem? So maybe if we're doing this holiday destination thing that we've been talking about, maybe the challenge is that the hotel has burnt down. It's very dramatic, but go dramatic. Oh my gosh, dramatic, dramatic, dramatic. It makes it so much more interesting, and you can do much more obvious allusions to your metaphors and similes and your language techniques. So hotel burnt down. Right, what's the consequences of that? So we need new hotel. Maybe it gets worse. Maybe everything's booked. Maybe you're on an island and it's the only hotel. How can you make it the worst possible situation? Okay, so you've got your consequence. So you've got your consequences there. The things that this hotel burnt down situation is. Then you've got your climax. Now, having got to this, I'm thinking that the climax could be, well, it could be one of two things, couldn't it? It could be something really, really exciting or really, really horrifically bad. So I'm going to go with something really exciting. And I'm going to say that actually they had such a bad experience that they were upgraded so they're going to meet the owner who apologizes. And he says they can stay on his private island, travel by private jet, and stay in his home for an extra 2 weeks all inclusive for free, including, getting better, including all excursions and £5,000 spending money each. Okay, it just got crazy. Okay, so that's gonna be my climax. Like, oh my god, this is so exciting, this is happening. And then the resolution could be something as simple as coming back home, having to tell work or school why you were off an extra 2 weeks, and how they take that, and maybe the contrast to the start. And what you can do here is say how that, you know, if you've talked in the beginning about getting off the plane and going into this amazing world of the sea and the sun, and you know, and then you've had a nightmare, but it ended up amazing because you ended up meeting the owner and having all these amazing things, and then you've come back and you can almost repeat the beginning and say, I step off the plane, instead of the sun hitting you like a wrecking ball, the rain hits me like little pins, jabbing me to remind me that I'm away from the amazing time I've just had. As I step into the terminal, the heating is on, as I've avoided the grey clouds that I've walked across the tarmac to avoid. Do you see what I mean? It's like you're still describing the same thing, as you have in the opening, but you're doing the complete opposite. Now that's going to show it's cyclical. So like a cycle, it's cyclical. So the examiners will love that because you're showing content. So not only are you showing your content, but you're also showing your structure. And then within your structure, you've got all your technical accuracy because you've done a contrast in the opening and the ending, and you've got your story because you've got a problem, you've got the climax. So remember, I mean, you might write something completely different. Your story about a holiday might be totally different. Your story about, it might be an unlikely friendship. You know, you can do a similar thing. My advice would be, though, don't make the mistake of writing an answer. Some people are told to do this. Write an answer, write a story, and then when you get into the exam, just adapt your story. So write a story, learn it, go in, and then just slightly adapt your story to fit with what the question is. The examiners can see it a mile off, and I would strongly recommend that you don't do that. If your teacher has recommended you do that, bear in mind you have the choice. Okay, if you want to listen to me, do. If you want to listen to them, do. I'm not going to be offended in any way, and I'm sure there are examples of people that have done that and it's worked. I just think have the confidence that you know how to answer these questions, and don't sell yourself short by not writing an original piece, because that's going to get you lost in it and you're going to do well. The other thing that you can do here, just as a little reminder, is decide in your plan what writing techniques you're going to use. So you might go, right, I'm definitely going to put a metaphor in there. I'm definitely going to put alliteration in there. I know I'm going to do my Lego Batman sentence structure when I start. And I know that in this bit, in the end, I'm going to end on a rhetorical question. Okay. The rhetorical question might be, will any holiday ever be as good as this? End. Probably not, because you're not going to stay on a private jet, likely. Okay, so that's your story. If you're going to plan your description, then all you need to do is do a similar thing. But get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. Similar thing, but instead of having it this way, as in you're looking at this story and the different things that happen in the structure of the story, look at different things you can describe. Okay, so in this situation, it could be physical. So it could be you do the people, you do the heat or the to do with the sun and the weather, and then the last bit could be the buildings. Can't spell buildings today. Or You could do something like the outer world and the inner world. So you could do the description of the inner thoughts. Then you could do the look of the picture. Now, bear in mind as well, this whole picture looks quite orange. And yet our brains play tricks on us and say, oh, well, this is black and this is white. And yet, if you actually look at it, it's orange because of the sunset. So think about that. Think about the sun turning everything orange. What does that do? And how does that make us feel and things like that? So this is not the story anymore. This is the description. And you're going to be looking at things like that. So try and find ways to separate sections of what you're going to describe so that you can then have lots to write about, but also show a really clear distinction of your planning and your structure. That's really, really important. You can still use touch, sight, sound, taste, hear. You know, what's this lady feeling and doing? Is she stalking this man? Hopefully not. Are they together? Is she just trying to get past him because he's being really slow? This woman's got one leg up. Has she hurt her foot? So you could describe it like she's standing on one leg like a stork or a flamingo fishing for food. You know, this guy here is walking against the grain, it looks like. Anyway, maybe I'm seeing that wrong, but it looks like he's walking this way instead of walking that way with everybody else. So, you know, who does he think he is? This couple here might be blinded by the light. This woman's holding her denim jacket. She's got her bag. She's got her shoes. What's the pavement like? Is it hot? What are the shadows like? They're stretched. What's stretchy? Lycra. Describe the shadows as stretchy like lycra. I don't know. Mrs. Incredible. The buildings, it makes the pointy bits look like, to me, look a bit like flags, and it's just part of the building. So that's brilliant. If it looks like something it isn't, I can use that as a metaphor. Yeah, so do you see how there's so much to write about? The fact that this car's going past and it's blurry, it's speeding past. Describe the car speeding past. Who's inside it? What could they be speeding for? So, you know, the small red car is speeding across the horizon as if the driver is late for the appointment of his life. You know, you can say anything like that. That's all stuff that's included. Now, very quickly, I want to take you through the mark scheme. Now, I know I've not done paper 2, but hopefully you will have got enough from that today to know that it's a similar thing. You're doing the same structure. You're still going to get half of reading, half of writing. You're still going to get in your reading section smaller numbers, smaller questions leading up to bigger ones. So in one paper, you'll have a 4 marker, an 8 marker, a 12 marker, and a 16 marker. And then in another paper, you'll have, for your reading section, you'll have 4, 8, 8, 20. Okay, so be aware, if you do a mark a minute, you can't go wrong. Okay, because that's going to make sure you space out your time appropriately for each question. And obviously that is a rough guide. If you get stuck and you end up going past that time limit on each question, just jump to the next question. Remember, you've got that time at the end of the session, at the end of the exam, to come back and check it. Don't lose marks because you're hung up on your first question. You know, that's probably going to be multiple choice anyway. So looking at looking at the mark scheme for this one, remember, they always start looking at the bottom of the section first. Okay, is this the right? So these are your assessment objectives. That's what the AO stands for, assessment objectives. Okay, so this is looking at the fisherman. Yeah, this is the fisherman village. So you get 1 mark for each of your questions, like the 4 mark thingamajiggy. So this assesses bullet point 1, identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. So remember, you're putting forward not only what you see, but what could be interpreted. And as long as you suggest it, you can't be seen as being wrong. Okay, so 2 marks, he fished in a skiff or boat. 1 mark is he's a fisherman. So you can see, just give a little bit more detail wherever you can. Okay, so things he'll reject is he is a man. That's obvious for any story. So make it be really specific of what they're asking you. Okay, so looking at the bottom, this is the bottom of the scheme. So everyone starts at a level 0 when an examiner picks up your paper. Then they're going to look at this. Level 1, 1 to 2 marks, shows simple awareness of language, offers simple comment on the effect of language, selects simple references or textual details, makes simple use of subject terminology, not always appropriately. So an example would be here. The writer says that the scars on the old man's hands were as old as erosions in a fishless desert, which shows that he has been a fisherman for a long time and he is old. Yes, that's true. Yes, that's valid, but it's very surface level and it's one of the explicit or obvious things. Whereas if we zoom up, I won't go through every single one, to level 4, which is going to get you 7 to 8 marks, shows perceptive and or detailed understanding of language, and that analyzes the effects of the writer's choices of language. Remember what I said earlier about the mosquitoes? It's the effects that they're looking at. How does it affect the writer? Think of that all the time. Selects a range of judicious textual detail, makes sophisticated and accurate use of subject terminology. So the example for that would be, the simile, as old as erosions in a fishless desert, is used by the writer not only to represent the physical decline of the old man, but to symbolize, this is implicit, this is what they're looking for, but to symbolize his recent lack of luck. The phrase as old as erosion signifies both his age and the harshness of his profession, with the worn down scars emphasizing the ravages. So ravages is definitely high in the vocabulary stakes. Ravages of his past successes and failures, struggling with huge fish. However, the metaphor, the fishless desert, serves to emphasize that for him the sea has dried up and his hard work is futile, as it is so long since he has caught his last fish. So you can see the real difference. And just going up through those little marks, simple comment on the effect of language, attempts to comment on the effect of language, explains clearly the writer's choice of language, analyzes the effects of the writer's choice of language. So you can see how, when you look at your answer, you can say, oh, well, where would I be in that? And then once you get to that level, they then decide if you've achieved almost all of those things to that high level, you would be in 8 marks. If you've done most of those things, maybe missed one or not quite got the analysis quite there, then you might be on the 7 marks. Okay, so that's how they grade your I think that's for content, isn't it? Yeah, that's for content. Okay, gonna whiz through those other questions. This is for your 20 marker. Okay, so this is for a quarter of your exam stuff. So focus as part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 16 to the end. Oh, actually, this is still reading, but this is, you are writing a lot more because remember, this is 20 marks. Okay, again, develops a convincing and critical response. They want you to be a critic, not just a student writing about the exam, but looking and saying, right, what is the writer doing? Why are they trying to make us feel that way? How do they do that? What literary things do they use, like alliteration, metaphors, similes? How do they use that? Why do they do it? And what does it symbolize? But always, what effect does it have on the reader? Question 5, you're writing. I know it's 1 o'clock. I'm sorry, I might run over by 2 minutes, maybe 3. So if you need to go, do, but I'll carry on going. I'm nearly done. So this is the fishing village and the unlikely friendship. So here we're looking at content and organization. So they grade 1 and then they grade another and they add your points together. So starting at the bottom, students will have not have offered any meaningful writing to assess, or they haven't written anything. Lower level or higher level of level 1. Simple limited communication. Communicate simply. Evidence of simple structural features. So you can see limited communication, limited. Most people tend to be around the kind of level 3-ish to start with. They've done those other things. So communication is consistently clear. Tone, style, and register are clear and consistently matched to purpose and audience. Increasingly sophisticated vocabulary and phrasing. So remember what I said about ambitious vocabulary. Here they're saying sophisticated because we're not at the top level yet. With a range of successful linguistic devices. So you're using your metaphors, similes, etc. And that's your content. And then organization, effective use of structural features, paragraphs, speech marks, things like that. Writing is engaging, so it's exciting to read, using a range of clear connected ideas, coherent paragraphs, that means they're you can understand them, with integrated discourse markers, in other words, knowing how to flow between them if necessary. And then if we go to the level 4, which is right up at the top, we've got an upper level and a lower level. Varied and effective structural features. Writing is highly engaging with a range of developed complex ideas. So if you're looking at, for example, the picture of the sunset, the fact that you're thinking about what's going on in their minds and describing how they look based on what might be going on in their minds is giving you a bit more in-depth. It's not just saying there is an orange jumper, an orange, dark orange trousers, there is a sunset. You know, it's about saying, you know, the man is walking and he looks like he is deep in thought with a serious look on his face that could indicate that he is trying to solve a very complex mathematical problem in his mind before his next lecture. I don't know. So you're almost creating these little characters by what you're saying. But at the top, communication is convincing and compelling, so they want to read it. Tone, style, and register are assuredly matched to purpose and audience. So you're not writing, for example, that sunset one, you're not writing it as if it's for a 5-year-old, for example. And extensive and ambitious vocabulary with sustained crafting of linguistic devices. So if you're making analogies of the fishing boats being like, I don't know if they're bobbing, what they're doing, I'm trying to think of something now, like bouncing, like they're bouncing on a trampoline, for example. That's a really bad analogy, but just say if you're looking at them bouncing like a trampoline, you might then use that later on as if they're bouncing from one trampoline to the other as they go along the beach once they're actually traveling. It shows you're using that analogy again but extending it. Organization, varied and inventive use of structural features. So for example, if you did black and then did a new paragraph, every great film starts with the black screen. That's inventive. You're not just doing black, every just part of a paragraph. So using black as an entire paragraph on its own is quite bold. You could do that. Writing is compelling, incorporating a range of convincing and complex ideas, fluently linked paragraphs with seamlessly integrated discourse markers. That's your content and organization. And then here it's a little bit more simple with the technical accuracy. Level 1, occasional use of sentence demarcation. So that means full stops, commas, exclamation mark, question mark. Some evidence of conscious punctuation, simple range of sentence forms, occasional use of standard English with limited control of agreement, accurate basic spelling, simple use of vocabulary. Then as we go up, the next one is about attempting it. The next one is about mostly secure, pretty much doing it, generally accurate, few mistakes. Top level, sentence demarcation is consistently secure and consistently accurate. That means always. Wide range of punctuation is used with high level of accuracy. So you're allowed to get some mistakes, but not many. Uses a full range of appropriate sentence forms for effect, uses standard English consistently and appropriately with secure control of complex grammatical structures, high level of accuracy in spelling, including ambitious vocabulary, extensive and ambitious use of vocabulary. So you can see what it is you are working towards. And it is exactly the same for your paper 2. The only difference is you're looking at that one from viewpoints, and that one will be a case of the second question. Well, the first question will be reading again and answering on those sources that you're given. And the second part of paper 2 is on the viewpoint of you, your perspective. So it'll ask you to give an opinion on something and use the question to break down what you're answering. So one was like about holidays. I'm doing all the holiday ones today. One was about holidays, and it said something like going on holiday doesn't need to be expensive and far away. It just needs to be a break from reality. So brilliant. If you're going to make your 3 points, remember in your exams, you're going to be wanting to make your 3 points because that's what they want to see. So your first point is whether it needs to be far away or not. Second point is whether it needs to be expensive or not. And the third point is about it needing to be a break away from everyday life. Write your point. So I don't believe it needs to be far away. I don't believe it needs to be expensive. And this is just an example. And you just need to make sure you switch off and relax. Your evidence is not going to be a quote because you don't have anything to quote from. Your evidence is going to be your experience. This is your personal viewpoint. That's what makes it valid. So you don't have to be honest. You can make it up. So my cousin Jemima, for example, she went to her next door neighbours for a holiday and she had such a great time. They played games the whole time. And if she forgot anything, she could pop next door and go back and get it. So going far away doesn't need to be a problem. That's your evidence. Then you might have being expensive. I went to my auntie's in Cornwall and had a lovely time, and it didn't cost us very much, but we made amazing memories, and that was what was important. Yeah, so that's your evidence part. And then the bottom part is you still want to put in your context and your explanation and bringing it out, you know. And so what we want to do is that Google Earth thing of zooming out and saying, okay, so depending on what you're writing to or who you're writing to or what you're writing about, if you're writing an article, for example, then you can be putting in that third paragraph, that third box on your essay plan. You can be putting in about how isn't it better for all of us to have a holiday and not worry about how far away it is? Shouldn't we normalize that holidays don't need to be abroad and highly expensive? This is having an effect on people's mental health. Remember what I've always said, you can always bring a question back to collective mental health as a means of helping people or helping the government save money, because you're probably going to have to write about to a person or to a government official or to a website or an article or a newspaper. So that covers those three. If you can talk about mental health, you are then looking at how that can affect mental health in a positive way and therefore proves your point. Then you go on to your next point and your next point and so on. I hope that has been useful. If you have any questions on the language paper, particularly language paper 2, just jot them down and send them over by text, because I know I've run over by 8 minutes. I'm so sorry. And I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great day and thank you so much. Bye.